universities where you are, then that is also something that should not be overlooked. And I think that this is a theme of a kind of recurring theme of mine, that, you know, there's always the big famous top universities, and everybody talks about those and everybody knows about those. And as a result, a lot of other universities kind of get overlooked. And so, you know, I went to a university that I had never heard of before I started applying. My brother went to a university that nobody's ever heard of, and he had an amazing education, and he was able to have a successful athletic career there. And so I would encourage people to not overlook the places that, you know, other places that are possibly options for them, and talk to people who have gone there, or talk to the people at those universities, because you don't need to go to, you know, a big name university to get a quality education. Yeah.
Thank you, and that's what I wanted, your opinion, because I can say stuff, and, you know, obviously I'm in the UK as well, so I have no idea about what's going on in the US, and I like to have this dialogue because it's different people from different walks of life. And something that you've touched on there is that, you know, we chase Oxford, we chase Cambridge, we chase Harvard, yeah. But there are other universities as well that, you know, are starting to catch up, and there are other universities that are established, but they don't really promote themselves very well, maybe we'll put it that way. So, you know, there's opportunity, you know, at home, or maybe to a neighboring country next door, yeah, instead of going so far afield. So no, thank you very much, that was very wise. I guess the next question is in regards to gender pay gaps. There's been a lot that's been on the internet and, you know, the news, etc. What is your opinion? Because obviously you'll be finishing soon and you'll be earning, hopefully well. So what are your thoughts on gender pay gaps?
I mean, you know, obviously a gender pay gap, the fact that it even exists is ridiculous. And I think that we've come a long way in trying to close not only the gender, but also any other, you know, demographic pay gaps, because gender is not the only factor that goes into discrimination and bias, in terms of not only pay gaps, but also hiring and things like that. And I'm in a field that certainly is no exception to that type of bias. It does seem like, well, so here I'm going to show my ignorance a little bit more. In the academic fields, I don't have a great sense for what how salaries and things are established. I also should mention I'm not actually going directly into a faculty position. So my next stop in my career is a postdoctoral research position, and so you know, and the salaries for these positions are standardized across the board, and so there's no pay gap for anyone, because they're standardized. Up above that, you know, I don't have a great sense for what the pay gap is in academia at the moment, because it's so flexible across, you know, different universities and different things, and I just haven't gotten the opportunity to look at all of that yet. I will say that it seems as if universities are taking this type of thing very seriously, and a lot of new up and coming people are getting into positions of power in the universities and making changes for that, and, you know, on hiring committees, trying to either blind the admissions decisions or offer a set salary based on you know, positions and qualifications that have nothing to do with your demographics. And the little bit that I've interacted with people here on hiring committees and things, it seems like that is a priority. And of course, you know, people can say all of that thing, and that doesn't necessarily make it true. But I will point out that this is broader than just this question, but there's been a big trend of this up and coming generation going into academia and other fields as well, that has had enough with this, you know, this environment of discrimination and bias, and, you know, even the concept that a PhD is supposed to be miserable. Like, there was for a long time, there was this idea that it was like, well, it was hard for me, so it should be hard for you too. And there was a lack of support, and there was a lack of mentoring, and a lack of training, or a lack of all of that. And people are really coming around to the fact that, miserable people do work, but happy people do better. And we do better work as well. And so universities are starting to get a lot more support for that thing. And of course, there are still lots of problems, and I'm not saying the problems are solved by any means. But I'm very encouraged by this new generation of people who are just entering academia and other positions, who are very vocal and who are very assertive about this type of thing, and pushing back against these changes, or pushing back against these norms, and trying to change things for the better. And a lot of people who are really emphasizing things like mentorship, or getting training outside your PhD, or doing whatever it is that you need to do. With that, I also want to make a plug for mental health. And so, PhD programs are notorious for difficult mental health situations because it's a stressful time.
Yeah.
You don't get paid very much, if at all. You're working long hours, and it's kind of a grind. And taking care of yourself in any job or any aspect of life is really important, because if you're not healthy and happy, you are not going to be able to do as well as you can. And of course, there are a lot of variables that go into that, but a lot of the things that I've seen that have been really helpful is that universities are trying to implement mental health things. And so, at our campus, we have free counseling and therapy. We have free access to, depression medications and things like that, and our insurance covers all of that. And it's really becoming a thing where the university is encouraging people to try to look out for themselves and get support if they need it. I know I've taken advantage of that. Everybody that I know has taken advantage of that, and it's really been a lot better trying to reduce this stigma. So I know I completely strayed off of the topic of your question, and I apologize for that. But I just want to, it's encouraging to see the shift in the mentality, not only in academia but also in all kinds of other industries as well. And there will always be problems, and there will always be battles to fight. But this is. There are some things that are moving in positive direction, which is encouraging for me, because I know myself and others, the job market is not encouraging right now. There's a lot of issues in the world and a lot of things to be upset about. And so it's nice to see some things are changing for the better.
No, I mean, you didn't go off on a tangent. That's not needed. You stated, things that you've observed, and also the last series, that was one of the questions in regards to mental health and how the universities are looking after us in research and post research, and also through COVID-19. So yes, you've answered the previous series question with the new series question. So no, you're in the right direction. So I guess I've got two more questions.
Okay.
And this question relates to diversity, equity, equality, and inclusion.
Uh-huh.
Now, this has been trending for the past, I think, 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Essentially. And, what are your thoughts on, diversity? Actually, it's usually diversity, equality, and inclusion. Those are the three that trend more. But I've added equity because I think that's important, and it is needed to balance it out. So what are your thoughts?
Absolutely.
In terms of research.
I'm glad that you mentioned equity, because I think, equality is a great thing to strive for, but I think equity is the more important thing to strive for. And so for people who may not be familiar with it, I'm assuming people know this at this point, but equality is essentially that everybody has the same opportunities and everyone's treated exactly equal. But that doesn't take into account the fact that the way that our society has been structured sets different people at a disadvantage from the beginning. And so treating everybody equal is not actually equal. It's giving people who are already advantaged or disadvantaged the same opportunities, which is basically just sustaining the system as it is. And so equity is trying to break down those differences in advantages and disadvantages, and trying to trying to level the playing field in that sense. And so, diversity, equity, and inclusion are, and also justice has been thrown around, social justice. These have been very they're kind of buzzwords, and especially over the last 2 years in the United States, at least, with different protests that we've had, as well as the inequalities that have been re-highlighted by COVID. Those have been really big buzzwords in institutions and things, and institutions have formed a bunch of DEI committees and all these things about how we can improve these things. And I think that all of that momentum and that mentality is really good, and that people are thinking about this, because diversity, equity, and inclusion are incredibly important, not only for the sake of fairness, but also for the sake of a better society. And so society is better when people are able to do what they want to do and are not blocked from being able to do what they want to do and what they're good at by arbitrary barriers that have nothing to do with them. In addition to that, and I'll speak more towards science. Science moves forward by ideas, and ideas come from different people. And different people provide different ideas and perspectives about how we think about the world. And so, from a productivity standpoint, diversity is incredibly important, because if you have a bunch of people in the room who are all raised the same way and came through the same universities and taught the same things, then they are going to have ideas, but they're all basically going to be coming from the same thing. The same background. Whereas if you have a person who is educated and lived in a completely different place and has different ideas about the world and the universe and how things work, then you can start to come up with totally what seem like totally random and novel ideas from the point of view of people who have never heard of that before, and then you can start to align those. And so I think that's the advantage of having diversity. And then where inclusion comes in is actually bringing those voices to the table and paying attention to them. And so, it's not enough to just have a diverse workforce, but also to include all of the people that are in that workforce in an equal way, in an equitable way, because you can have great ideas, but if people don't listen to them, then that doesn't do you any good either. And so that's the idea behind inclusion. And I will say it is encouraging to see all of the effort and passion that's gone into trying to increase this in the last couple of years. There has also been a great deal of cynicism, at least in academia, and probably a lot of other places that are like, what are we actually doing with these committees? And oftentimes these committees are made up of people, in the programs who have no expertise whatsoever in this. And so I actually sat on a committee for a couple of years, and that was great. And I wanted to make change, but I'm a scientist. Like, I know how to use a pipette and I know how to use a microscope, but I'm not a political science person, and I'm not an expert in how to do this. And so, I can have all the passion I want, but that doesn't mean that I know what exactly it is that needs to be done. In addition to that, we can say whatever we want in our meetings, but what really needs to happen is at the university level. And so what has often been happening is like DEI committees get together and they talk about things that need to be changed, and they write statements, and there are small changes that make a big difference. And so, we've set some standards for mentoring and things, but a lot of those kind of go largely ignored by institutions, both within academia and outside, and other institutions as well. And so if you're just sitting in a room talking about what could be better, but then nothing actually changes, that doesn't help anything. And so what really needs to happen is universities need to actually embrace this as an initiative, and then literally put their money where their mouth is and bring in people who, experts in social science and experts in this type of thing, who can actually make these decisions, who can work with people at the university so that they know what they're doing. And then the university needs to put their money behind this and actually fund and listen to do these efforts. And you've seen time and time again, there are so many different initiatives that a university decides to do that goes completely against the will of the students. we've had some things here where like 80% of students are against it, and the university just goes with it anyway. And what you have to understand is things like Hopkins are, they're a business, and they have a bottom line, right?
Yeah.
And so they have obligations beyond, the students. But if you're ever going to fix things like this, you need to actually listen to your community and your students and take that into account and try to make this a thing. So I realize I'm kind of rambling and this. I think the concepts of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice are incredibly important for a functioning society, as well as a productive and I keep saying happy. I want another word other than happy, but a good society, both in the workforce and out. And I think those are great things to focus on. And I think we really need to find out how to put resources to people who can actually make that change and who have the authority to make that change. And we need to get people in those positions who are interested in doing that.
That's true.
And like I said, this new generation of people coming up into academia is a completely different beast than what has been seen in academia before. It's not the thing. A lot of people are very conscious about these types of things, and so as the old generation starts to get out and the new generation that's more interested in this starts to get in, then I think we'll see a lot of those changes. I do want to say, not everybody who's in academia right now and at the top is resistant to change. There are a lot of amazing advocates for that type of thing, and I don't want to bash the people who are there already, but change is slow, and and even people who are passionate about this are stuck oftentimes within the confines of the system and the structure that it is right now. And so, getting new people and new blood into that system will, I'm hopeful that will help.
Okay, I guess I'll round off this way before I get to my final question.
Sure
Just
thing.
like bacteria, right? It's got systems. And it's longitudinal, so you told me, and you can cut it in the middle, but the systems, they restrict us from actually understanding, and also learning from them. But we need to be patient. It's the same as diversity, equity, justice, and inclusion and equality, essentially.
Absolutely.
Did I get that right?
Yeah. I mean, and you've got to adapt. You've got to work within the structure, but then and then be able to move forward with that and the constraints. So yeah.
Amazing. I was listening.
Yeah, you nailed it.
So the final question is, PhD Hard Talk. What made you want to literally have a discussion with me about your research on PhD Hard Talk? And do you think PhD Hard Talk is beneficial for the communities in which we conduct our research in terms of social sciences or in terms of labs? Obviously, with the medication goes back to the community. And also in research, we attend all these conferences, we speak about our research, and we're challenged about our papers, etc. What is your opinion? And be honest, really,
yeah, of course.
About PhD Hard Talk?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm super excited to be here and honored. So thank you so much for inviting me onto this show. I think that, and this goes back to my idea about diversity of ideas, having something that brings people together to talk about issues, and bringing different people with different perspectives is honestly the best thing that we can do for not only research but also for our society as a whole. And you were very modest about it, but it seems like PhD Hard Talk has at least an international standing at this point. You and I are in different countries, so that counts for me. And getting the message out there is really important. And I also think that it's really good that it's a discussion. And I look forward to engaging in discussion on social media. I'm certainly not an expert in any of the things that we've talked about, even bacteria. And so I don't have all the answers, and I know that I'm often wrong about things. But I think that being able to put yourself out there and having the opportunity to get different to talk about, my experience and tell people out there in the world who might be looking for somebody like that experience is really encouraging. And then being able to, watch through the rest of the series and learn about all kinds of different experiences and things that you may not have heard of before, and issues that you may not have been aware were a problem or things like that. And that's the type of communication and things that we really will benefit the scientific community and beyond. I do know, when I was in high school, we had college students come in and sit on panels and stuff, and we got to ask them all kinds of questions. And there were so many things that just blew my mind. Like, I can't even remember because it was 12 years ago. We don't have to talk about that. But we, so many things that I didn't know at first. And the same is true, actually, even more so for graduate school. So in biological sciences, like we don't pay tuition, and we actually get paid a stipend to do research. I had no idea. I had applied to graduate school before I even realized that I wouldn't be, spending $100,000 or whatever for, a PhD. And I really had no idea what I was doing when I applied to things, and I got very lucky that I landed in a program that was a good fit for me. But the more that we can have people talking about this and have that visibility, the more that people like me, who were totally ignorant and still remain so to this day about certain things, can look at this and hopefully be encouraged and get some advice. And I also just want to say, I'm not an expert in it by any means, but if anybody sees this and wants to reach out to me, there will be links to socials and things. Feel free to reach out. And if I don't know the answer, I can try to find somebody who does. If you're really passionate about academia or research or anything like that, I'm totally happy to help in any way that I can.
That's the way forward. And I guess the other thing is, how you've touched on, you wouldn't necessarily know. Like, I didn't know that, you could conduct research with seaweed. And I think I was blown. I thought seaweed was like just green, but there's different colors. And, I've learned so much through PhD Hard Talk, and also the different routes that you can take to get to a PhD level or postgrad or, etc. So no, you are right. Absolutely. In what you're saying. So thank you very much for sharing that information. We've come to the end of.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to add one more thing because I just thought of it. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. No,
I'm going to rewind back to the question about admissions. And so, again, I'm not in the realm of undergraduate admissions these days, so I don't know that much about it. For biological PhD research programs, I will say this about admissions. So I did mention that we have dropped our standardized test requirements. We still consider GPA, but the most important pieces of an application are actually research experience and like the letters of recommendation that you get. Mm-hmm. And so if you are like me and looking to go into research or science or any type of program that is that type of thing with a professional school after an undergraduate, I would look for universities that have opportunities to do research. Because my ability, I was able to do research at my undergraduate university, and then I was able to articulate that and have some experience in that, which made me know that I actually wanted to do a PhD program. Because one of the biggest downfalls is people who apply to our program, but they've never done research, and it's like, are you sure that you actually want this? Because this is 6 hard years, and you may hate research. And so. And not only from an application and, an admission standpoint, but also just you want to actually make sure that this is something you want to do, because a PhD is a big commitment. And if that is, if you do research and hate it in undergrad, you don't want to apply for a PhD research program.
No, you don't.
And so I really encourage people to try to find a university that will have opportunities for them to do research, and like high quality research where they can be in a lab and actually doing the projects. And you can reach out to, faculty at schools who do research, and they'll respond to you. The faculty sometimes take high school students into their labs, and you can work there for like a summer as an intern, get some experience doing that. And you can also contact the advisors in the departments and ask them about research programs and things at the university. Because if that's something that you're really serious about, you definitely want to have some experience doing research before going to graduate school. And something like that will be way, way, way more important for your not only your career, but also your application to graduate schools than something like a number on a piece of paper for your GPA. At least that is the perspective in the the circles that I run in. Obviously, different universities probably have different standards, but
Yeah, and I think I'm just going to touch on one thing that you've just touched on, and that is you've mentioned apply to a university that can give you access to labs so you can gain work experience. So why is it that institutions, I mean, this is just a question, it's your opinion. Why is it that some universities, they don't give that opportunity if it's really required and if it's needed? Because then if you're a first gen, your parents are not going to tell you that you need the experience.
Right.
You're just going in blindfolded. And it's a glass ceiling.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I'm really glad you mentioned that, because that's another barrier to research that, people like both of my parents went to college. Neither of them majored in biology, and neither of them went to graduate school. And so, they had been to college, but I had no idea what I needed for and I got really lucky because I went to a university that had good research. I got into a research program there, and I got into a lab, and that helped me get to where I am now. I would have done that intentionally had I known that was what was required, but I didn't realize that. And so I would say that there are typically maybe two reasons why a university doesn't offer research experience. One is just resources. And so, a research program is difficult to have, and you need resources. And a lot of research programs are funded by either government agencies or other foundations. But there's still a significant amount of overhead that needs to be covered by the university and things like that. And so, a lot of smaller universities, even if they don't have their own research program, sometimes they will pair with either a company or some other industry in their area, and they have some kind of research with that. The other thing is, and I'm not going to name any names, but I will say that focusing on undergraduate universities that focus on undergraduates is a really helpful thing, because again, their resources are going toward the undergraduates, whereas there are other universities that are focused on the graduate level and maybe they're hospitals or something else. And so that's not to say that you can't get a good education there, but I've talked to more than one professor from other universities who basically viewed undergraduates as dishwashers in their lab. And I actually invited one of them to speak at my university, and he was amazed that undergraduates were doing actual research and not just like cleaning glassware or doing whatever, which is, that is all an essential part of the lab running. And those are really important jobs, but they are not jobs that get you experience, coming up with hypotheses to test and everything. And so, I've worked as a glass cleaner. I've done all of that thing, but I've also gotten the opportunity to do real research. And some universities don't view undergraduates as capable of doing research. I shouldn't say that. Some professors don't view undergraduates as that. And so it's really important to try to find a university and that has faculty that encourage that type of thing. I cannot speak highly enough of state universities. So they're huge universities. They have tons of funding, and they're geared toward undergraduates. They usually have a lot of biological chemistry labs in everything. Arizona had like hundreds of labs to choose from.
Yeah.
And so that is definitely a great option for doing something like that.
Yeah, that's quite.
Hopefully I didn't offend anybody in this talk, but I call it like I see it. It's that is the reality in some senses. So
I think the disclaimer that I'm going to use is this is your opinion, and it's based on experience and also observation. And we might laugh at the fact that you said dishwashers, but there's no work experience there. You got how many people have wiped glasses? It's not really work experience, and it's not what they're looking for. So bringing awareness to that minor or maybe big step
Yeah.
is required. So this is a disclaimer. This is your opinion. This is Jordan's opinion.
Yeah.
And we're only sharing to bring awareness to say, you know, when you do apply, be wary and do check, read everything and ask the right questions. Don't just say accept, you know, a conditional offer or an unconditional offer. Do check and ask the relevant questions, maybe not right questions, relevant questions.
Yeah,
and hopefully that will help just based on your guidance, Jordan. So thank you so much again for that and for your time. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. This was great.